Thank you for coming out. This session is about operations dashboard, tips and tricks. My name is Dave Nineheis. I'm on the development team. And just by show of hands, how many are current dashboard users? Excellent. All right, so we can jump into some good tips. Hopefully my voice holds out and you can hear me. So far, so good. I'll be covering kind of two sections. First, I'll go through tips and things to think about when you're designing your dashboard. Then I'll go through tips for individual elements that you can hopefully use in your own dashboards. All right, so designing your dashboard. I'm going to assume that you have a broad understanding of operations dashboard. If you don't, check out the product page here. Let's take, for example, this dashboard. It's monitoring snowplow activity, snow removal activity. So I have snowplows, the status of streets, and complaints that have come in. The dashboard's pretty simple. And on the right side, I have 3 elements that are related to complaints. The dashboard is clearly displays information about the complaints, but let's just say that in terms of the layout, maybe not all of the information is pertinent to have up front in the user's view. So I can modify this layout and by dropping this in the middle, I can stack the element. And now this list, perhaps secondary information, is accessible but not directly visible when the dashboard loads. Also, maybe this indicator here isn't crucial to have on the top. So by holding shift while I drag, I can actually group this. Now I have my list and the indicator both in one tab. Just a little layout trick that I want everyone to know about. Next thing to consider is the interactivity of your dashboard. Maybe it's on a wall-mounted display, in which case you don't really need much interactivity. But you can add a lot of interactivity tailored to your needs. So in this case, I have a few charts, and I've configured it such that when I make a selection, I apply filters to my other elements. So now I'm just seeing the crimes for the last 3 days. This dashboard is just showing fake crime data. And if I want to also filter just to see a certain division, I can select one on that chart. And also, if I want to reduce it to just a certain crime type, I can do this. Another way to add interactivity is through selectors. Selectors are kind of a form-based input that you see here. This is a category selector, essentially a drop-down, that allows me to choose a police division, similar to what I did with the chart, but it's more of like a form-based approach in this panel. Another type of interactivity that you could think of is maybe a kind of a hands-free interactivity. I actually just posted a blog about making this dashboard. You can use a category selector and always have it zoom the map to the most recent event if that's the type of data that you're working with. looks like my link on the bottom is cut off. There. All right, so that's a link to the blog. You can also look it up. Just look at Operations Dashboard blogs. Another display technique, if you're on a Windows machine, most browsers you can save the page to the desktop, and when you open it, it will open it without the URL address bar and without the tab. So in this front view, it just has a little header. It just looks nice. The next thing I want to discuss when you're designing your dashboard is color. Color can be used a number of different ways. It can connect related data together. So in this case, my symbology and these indicators clearly have a connection, a relationship. Colors can direct a user's eyes. So in this dashboard, my eyes are immediately drawn to the left. The big, bold, red text of the indicator and the charts, as well as the animating symbols they have on the map and in the list. Colors can also be used to evoke emotion. So in this case, the red color gives a sense of alarm or seriousness. Similar in this dashboard, the yellow color has a sense of caution or seriousness, as well as this red list here. It creates a sense of urgency. If you're using a dashboard in a dimly lit room, the dark theme is a great way to go, and you can configure it beyond the defaults. So in the dashboard settings, you can configure the background color, the element background color, the outline color, the text color, a lot of different properties. And this is just one way that I created a certain effect where it has a dark backdrop and a high contrast text. Colors can also be used for branding purposes to create a sense of authenticity, or just for a certain aesthetic. In this dashboard, the author simply extracted some of the colors from the base map, such as the ocean color, the label color, and reused them in their dashboard. Very quick and easy, and you'll be amazed at the outcome. There's a lot of great base maps out there with great color combinations. Here's just another example. This is a red theme dashboard. The darker the red, the more serious the crime type. And lastly, you want to consider whether the dashboard might be embedded into another app or website. So in this case, this website has a dashboard that's embedded right inside of it, and you can match the color themes of the website. Another thing to just mention, this is a vector tile style editor. This is available through ArcGIS Online, and it's a great tool to create beautiful base maps that are tailored towards your needs. And another thing to consider with embedding dashboards is that you could utilize the new capability of URL parameters that we released back in December. Here I have a dashboard with URL parameters configured. I'll show you how I did it in just a second. But as I scroll through this story map, I'm applying different URL parameters. So here I am applying an advisory parameter So when and so it applies a filter to my elements. Here, I'm only showing the sites with high mercury levels. Here, I'm showing the sites with high bacteria levels. And I can also apply a zoom action to a feature, pass in a feature ID. So just a preview on how I did that. If you go back into the dashboard settings, under URL parameters, here I've defined 5 different parameters for applying different filters and zoom actions. So when I pass in a county, I zoom to it, and I also filter my other visual elements. All right. So let's transition into getting into details on the visual elements themselves. First, we'll look at serial charts. A serial chart is essentially a bar chart, line chart, area chart, and a combination chart, simply by toggling configuration settings. Here we're looking at a date-based chart, so I'm using a date field and binning it to count the number of crimes per day over a 28-day period. It's a great chart, but let's look at how we might modify it based on the audience, display environment, and the purpose of it. What information do you want to get out of this chart? And account for simplicity and legibility. So let's say that the audience is a police chief, and he or she views this chart in a dashboard daily on a tablet. And the purpose is really just to give an update of the daily crime counts for the past day. So I no longer need 28 days. I can show the last 7 days. I also applied a filter to exclude today because it's not a full crime or not a full day of counts. Here I'm showing the series value, so you can see the exact count as opposed to having to judge or hover over this. And because I'm showing the labels, I no longer need the value axis. I also increased the font size so that it comes through and is easy to read. And I've adjusted the category labels to include the day of week. Let's say that instead we're going to mount this on a wall-mounted TV. And the purpose is really just to show fluctuations of crimes by type. So here I've added a split by field. I'm splitting by the crime category, the crime type, and I'm showing it in a legend here. Here I'm using a line series, and I've added back the value axis and the grid lines to allow you to see the values. Perhaps the purpose is to really just identify spikes and abnormalities in the criminal activity. In this one, I'm binning by hours, and I've removed the value axis, but added what's called a guide. And this acts as a threshold. So this is 25 crimes per hour. Maybe the chief wants to be alerted when this threshold has been exceeded. And we can see that on Thursday, it has been exceeded. I am using a split by field of category type, crime category. And I am using bars, but stacking them so that I can see the cumulative counts, but see the composition, the breakdown of property versus violent. And if you remove all the decoration, you can even make a chart like this. And just to see the fluctuation. Regarding discrete-based serial charts, so data that has no inherent linear order to it, just a reminder, it's best used with bars and not lines. This is something we see from time to time because this implies that there is some inherent order or progression of the data. Also, the date-based charts, there is a limitation of when your data exceeds 50,000 features, you may receive an error when you're querying for it. There is a little backdoor trick used with extreme caution, but there is a setting in your JSON of the dashboard that you can increase if need be. Again, test it, use extreme caution, and you might also need to increase your max record count. Moving on to pie charts. Pie charts are commonly used and can easily be perhaps misused or ill-used. So I just want to point out some do's and don'ts. The chart on the left is a great example of a pie chart. It has two categories, and I can easily see that there's that 10% of the closed incidents have been canceled and 90% have been completed. On the right side, I have a pie chart that has a lot of different categories. And they're not ordered in any particular logical way. The chart doesn't render well, and the text for the labels is quite long. So let's see if we can do a few things to kind of improve it. First of all, I recommend sorting by the statistic in descending order. So it goes from largest to smallest as you go around clockwise. Next, if you have a lot of little slices, you can add a grouping percentage. In this case, I'll add 5. That means that slices 5% or less, or actually less than 5%, are grouped into an other category, thus reducing the number of slices you have. And as a rule of thumb, I recommend no more than 6 slices on a pie chart because it just becomes not readable, not understandable. You can also add an inner radius to reduce the visual complexity of the angles in the middle. And your mind also now kind of translates this into measuring lengths of bent lines rather than areas. Just a little bit of psychology. And always consider whether a serial chart would be better suited for this visualization. Oftentimes it is. And in doing so this is the same data set, and I'm just showing the top 5 categories. In doing so, I realize, oh, my data is sparse. And so the percentages are kind of a little bit misleading. Next, I want to talk about lists. Always make sure to direct the user's eyes to what's important. Don't just display everything, because if you display everything and equally, they don't know what to look for. So guide their eyes with bolded text. Here's a couple of examples how you can just extend it a little bit. if you go into the HTML editor and click source, you can type in your own HTML, you can put images, you can play with the styles and the formatting like this. Here I have an inline break that wraps to the next line when it gets bumped. And here I'm floating things left and right. You can also use a color from a field. You can reference a color field if you want to make your text color based on an attribute. And to do that, I published a simple CSV, joined it to my crime layer, and now I'm using that view in here. This is another example where I'm just showing kind of a label or tag-like effect. Indicators are highly used and very effective in giving simple information that's quickly digestible. You can do a lot, though, to enhance it a little bit more. So using what's called a reference along with conditional formatting, I can display this indicator differently based on how my values are coming in. So when I have no crimes, I can keep it simple and kind of a muted black. I can also use references to query another statistic to compare it to. In this case, I'm comparing it to last year at this time. So I have crimes for the last 28 days compared to last year at this time. And I'm displaying the difference as well as the percent change. And then I can also reference a different data set altogether. And here I'm displaying the ratio of crimes per population, or 1,000 inhabitants. I encourage you to check out this blog. It goes into a lot of detail for how you do this. And with that, I'll conclude and open it up to questions. We covered designing dashboards and also tips on adjusting certain components of the visual elements themselves. Please take our survey. Any questions? Derek. I don't have that pulled up, but I can. All right. So after the questions, I'll pull up a blog with useful links. Any other questions? Yes.
Can you do any of the other APIs like access dashboards like they do for like web apps? Right? Can you get to like the HTML stuff?
The question was about whether you can get to the HTML behind the dashboard. The answer is that it's not a downloadable app like some of the other ones. So no. Do we have to go? Do we have to go? Yep, so we have an island just out here. I encourage you to stop by if you have questions or if you want us to take a look at a bug or enhancement that you have. We're also available on GeoNet, and we always love seeing your dashboards. You can share them on social media with #OpsDashboard, and that guy will be tracking you and find you. That's Derek Law. All right, thank you.